The Aaron Rodgers Achilles injury saga has officially come to an end, as he announced earlier today on the Pat McAfee Show that he is not going to be medically cleared and is in fact done for the year. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Brian Sutterer, and my goal on the channel is to help teach you about the medical side of the sports world. Now we're gonna just finally wrap up this whole storyline, this whole discussion, because of course we found out earlier today that Rodgers, as we've all expected this whole time, is not going to be medically cleared, and said some things in his comments on the Pat McAfee Show that go like completely against what we've kind of been told and have been hearing this whole time. But let's just walk again, put some finality, put a bow on this whole story. We'll look at some of the recent practice footage, because I was actually pretty impressed about the practice footage we saw last week. We'll talk about some things that I've learned, some actual positive stuff. It's not going to all be negative here towards Rodgers. And then finally finish up with just some kind of behind the scenes discussion of what goes into clearing an athlete, because that's a little bit ambiguous of a term that I want to put some more information behind. This news that we heard last week is really where I think things kind of hit a maximal point of just frustration with what we were being told versus what we heard today. Because last week, everything was such a week ago with Aaron Rodgers' Achilles recovery that they fully expected they would medically clear him to play, assuming, of course, the Jets had won last week. Of course, the Jets did not win. They're out of playoff contention, and so it doesn't make sense to bring him back. But to go from hearing this reporting that he's expected to be medically cleared to then finding out today on the Pat McAfee Show that he said in reality it was completely unrealistic to expect that he would be 100% medically cleared at this point in December is just completely contradictory, and I think really just frustrates all of us fans. Let's take a listen to some of his comments on the Pat McAfee Show.
Once I was able to start jogging on the Alter G at about between the 8th and 9th week, things have progressed.
Remember that jogging on the Alter G is a treadmill that reduces the body weight that you're putting through your lower extremities. And so you can reduce that down to 10, 15, 20% of your body weight. It's a great rehab tool, but it's not equivalent to walking on a true treadmill. Now, you can gradually change the load to where it is more indicative of true running load, but the Alter G is a way to reduce your body load while running and still get some running back.
I've been doing the 7-on-7 flight school, which is basically 2s and 3s, P-squad guys.
Let's take a look at some of that practice footage, because I was actually pretty impressed with what we saw from Rodgers last week. This footage was from the Jets at practice last week, and I gotta admit, Rodgers looked like he was moving pretty good. I was pretty impressed when I saw this. He doesn't really seem to be favoring one side or the other. I know I made a comment about that little flip he was doing with his left foot just before his release, not after. It seems like he's been doing that his whole career. So to be able to drop back like this, release the football, move like he was, honestly, I'm pretty impressed with that. But as Rodgers is hinting to, there is a huge difference between a controlled practice setting and being in a full game environment at 100%, where you might have a 300-pound lineman falling on you, or you're trying to react in unpredicted ways. But I will say, seeing what he did in practice, pretty impressive. Kudos to him. That looked actually really good.
It was unrealistic to think that I would be 100% to be medically cleared at any point during the regular season.
We'll address that next. But first, before we do that, I want to take a break and give a quick shout out to the sponsor of this video. This video is sponsored by AnCollar. AnCollar is a company based here in the States that makes performance dress wear for men. Without a doubt, these are the most comfortable and best dress shirts I've ever worn. In fact, for the past couple of years, every single time you've seen me in one of these videos, I've been wearing one of AnCollar's shirts, and most likely one of their ties as well. Their shirts are made from a proprietary blend of fabrics that actually originate from recycled plastic bottles. That proprietary fabric gives them that extremely comfortable feel. It really does feel like you're wearing an athletic shirt, but looks professional like a dress shirt. They're extremely lightweight, and they even repel stains. I mean, I don't know of a more comfortable dress shirt that can also do something like this. Right now, if you head to the link down below and use my promo code BRIANMD, you're gonna get 15% off your purchase, applicable for the next 6 months. But wait, there's more, because not only does AnCollar make comfortable dress shirts, but they also have a wide range of selections like pants, blazers, polo shirts, ties, shoes, socks, and even different sizes like athletic and slim fit. Oh yeah, and did I mention these things are wrinkle free? Like seriously, put them in the wash, hang them up to dry on a hanger, zero ironing ever done to these. So if you've seen these shirts and wonder where you can get one yourself, or you're just looking to step up your wardrobe, then check out the link below, code BRIANMD, to get some fantastic quality AnCollar clothes today. Let's back up a little bit here and listen to that again.
It was unrealistic to think that I would be 100% to be medically cleared at any point during the regular season.
So this is where it's just kind of frustrating to hear, because I think the tune we've all been exposed to throughout this whole saga was that Rodgers expected to be cleared, and saying that you will be cleared and you're expected to be cleared, and then come out and say, No, it was unrealistic to ever have been cleared back to be 100% by the end of the regular season. That's the honest reality. That's what we've all been saying this whole time, that it was completely unrealistic to expect him to be 100%. But the fact that the narrative got out of control to where it was presented as if he was going to be 100% is where this was also frustrating. I will say, credit to Rodgers here. He's specifying 100% cleared, and he'll go on to talk about how it was more than a balance of talking about the risk of returning, which is what I've said this whole time. But the way the media tells it to us, the way it's portrayed to us, is that he will be 100% cleared, ready to go, boom, done, which he now is admitting was never a realistic timeline. Even, we're now mid-December, he said, by the regular season, so even at that 4-month mark.
I do feel like in the next 3 to 4 weeks, it would be very possible to get to 100%.
That just completely contradicts himself, because the end of the regular season would be in 3 weeks. So on one hand, he's saying it would be unrealistic to be 100% by the end of the regular season, but then follows it up by saying that he thinks it would be possible to be 100% in 3 weeks. So again, everything just kind of contradicts itself and doesn't line up with what we had been told and presented this whole time, but in reality lines up with what we expected would be the true medical recovery and trajectory of this.
But obviously not there. And so the conversation was away from 100% medical clearance to a willingness to play.
And that's what I've been talking about this whole time, is that you're not going to be 100% healed. And so the conversation really has to be, what's the risk? And that's maybe sounds like a little bit of nuance and nitpicky, but that's a big difference, because if people don't understand that that's what we're talking about for clearance here in mid-December, you interpret it as, well, it's normal to be 100% at 3.5 months. But as Rodgers admits right now, that's not a realistic time frame. That never was a realistic time frame. And so then if you're going to stray outside of that 100% normal, you have to do it with the caveat that you're accepting some level of risk and having a completely different conversation. So now what we're hearing is more the reality. This is the true, honest conversation that we have with athletes of, look, we don't think you're going to be 100%. So let's talk about the risks and the benefits and then let you make an informed decision.
I'm still, 14 weeks tomorrow from my surgery, and, being medically cleared as 100% healed is just not realistic at 14 weeks.
That's what we've been saying this whole time. And so I just wish that would have been more the conversation, that, look, even if we get to that December 24th game, 14 weeks, it's not 100%. He's not fully healed. And there's a whole different level of discussion about the risks. Now, where we go next from here in terms of Rodgers' recovery, he said that he's going to keep it up at the same pace, which I guess is okay. You think maybe you're probably going to back off a little bit, not to toe that line so much. I thought this was an interesting video that they shared from this user iRocky83, where we can see kind of what Rodgers' functional status was on the sideline a little bit with that liftoff. So of course the Achilles is going to be stretched when you're raising up on your toes here. It'd be nice if we saw if Rodgers was doing that on just a single leg, because single stance liftoff like that is going to be more difficult than both feet. But the fact that we're seeing him at least raising up on his tiptoes, good to see, positive sign, but obviously very different than playing football. There's this really important conversation that we have to have about the difference between return to sport and return to performance. And so if you think about somebody's recovery, that early part of the recovery in terms of when you're first getting moving, you're first mobilizing, might feel a little bit slow. Then you hit this middle part of your recovery where things tend to actually speed up pretty quick. And we saw that with Rodgers. We saw how rapidly he went from walking on crutches to walking without crutches to then dropping back and throwing passes. But then on the tail end of it, that last little bit of recovery is really hard and takes the longest time, because that's the highest level of function. That's the highest level of performance. If we kind of think about this graphically, right? Generally things go pretty slow. You suddenly improve a lot, but then getting back this last little bit, this is what takes the longest time, is to get back that performance level. And I think that's what Rodgers discovered here. He realized that he can progress through this first part pretty quick. You can get through that weight bearing, you can get back your walking, you can get rid of the crutches pretty darn quick. But this last phase of that recovery, that last phase of return to sport, is the hardest phase, and that's what takes the longest. Whether we're talking about an ACL, we're talking about an Achilles, a pec rupture, you name it, that last bit of performance takes a long time. And I think Rodgers sort of hit this point at this recent week and realized that getting back this last bit was just never a realistic factor within that planned timeline. So then let's finish up talking about just the medical clearance process. To make it all as simple and basic as possible, when I'm talking about clearing an athlete to return, there's one question of biologic healing time in terms of if they've had a surgery. the just time it takes for the tissue to heal, for the tissue to integrate back in and get stronger. The second part of it is what's their function. And so there's three fundamental things. What's their range of motion? What's their strength? And can they do sport-specific stuff and protect themselves? In Rodgers' case, what's his ankle range of motion? What's his ankle strength? And can he do football activities and do it in a safe way? If you can meet those three criteria and you have adequate biologic healing time, that's when you say, yes, we can clear somebody to return. In Rodgers' case, not only is he missing part of that duration in terms of biologic healing time, which he talked about with that stretch it versus stress it, he doesn't have that function. He doesn't have that sport-specific function yet, and so you don't meet those basic criteria to return to sport. But if he did, if he had met that biologic healing time, if he had good function, good strength, good range of motion, and was able to do football stuff, then sure, by all means, clear him. But as we, of course, again have learned today, that is not realistic at the 3-month mark and is probably at the best case scenario for a quarterback like him, probably somewhere around 4.5 to 5 months. And that brings me to what I will finish up with here about some positive things from what I've learned from this, what I think Rodgers has done in a positive light with his injury. He mentions about the importance of early weight bearing, early mobilization. I agree. I think the general trend with a lot of surgeries is if we can get people moving sooner, that's better. And so I think Rodgers has done everybody a good service by showing that it's okay to do some of this early range of motion in the right surgical setting with the right type of injury and the right surgery, but helping to kind of push along maybe some people's fear about moving too soon. So getting people moving earlier, I think, is a good thing. And I'm happy to see that Rodgers did get that out there and did kind of push that. I also will say that in general, I think it's always good to be trying to do what you can to push the boundary. We always want to be improving. We always want to be speeding things up. We just have to be realistic about how we do it. And so take, for example, Cam Akers. Cam Akers came back, 6-month recovery from an Achilles for a running back. Unprecedented, unheard of, but he did it. I do think what Rodgers was able to do, especially in that first part of his rehab, does sort of set a new standard in terms of where we can get early on. But we still don't know what that last 10% looked like. We don't know if Rodgers would have gotten there in the next 3 to 4 weeks. Had he, then that would be, about a 4.5 month recovery? And so I think realistically, best case scenario for a player like Rodgers, a not necessarily mobile quarterback who's able to tolerate a little bit of risk at the end of their career, I still think best case scenario, we're looking more at like 5 months. And so yes, in the future, maybe if somebody like Rodgers gets an Achilles rupture in the spring or in the early summer, this will serve as some motivation to say, hey, maybe we can get back, maybe we can return that following season. And so I think that's good. I think that's positive. I just think we have to be careful because Rodgers had every opportunity to kind of squash that narrative. And that difference of being 100% medically cleared versus being cleared, but with understandable risk, is very, very important in the world of sports medicine. And I think patients need to understand that. And so that's the disappointing part now, is to hear right after the whole time, I'll be back in December. It would have been not possible to come back in December. So the narrative kind of changed, but what we're hearing now is the true reality. That makes more sense with what we should expect. Again, hats off to Rodgers for what he did. I think he did do a lot of great stuff with showing what we can accomplish kind of early on, but that last bit is the hardest part. And until we see somebody do that last bit in a safe and an effective way, I still think we're going to be somewhere around that 5 to 6 months, best case scenario, especially for a player like Rodgers. I still think basketball, running backs, Akers was still very much an exception. Basketball players, I can't imagine quicker than 6 months until we see otherwise. So we're kind of toeing the line. We've learned a lot. There's been some things I wish could have been done differently, but I think at least we can finally say that this whole story, this whole saga has come to an end. Let me know, as always, any questions or comments down below. And until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.